like there's this very peaceful, sweet, loving place that we hang out in together when it's just the two of us, especially. Mm-hmm. And I think I just tread really cautiously because I feel like she's really vulnerable, and that's why she's so protected. Like she needs to have those boundaries for her. And do
you think your expression of vulnerability could make her feel more at ease with her own?
Probably. Maybe. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
Well, you don't know till you try.
Yeah. That's true.
But I find sometimes if we can come to people from a tender, vulnerable place and say, I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling separation between us that doesn't feel good. Is there any way that we can talk about that together? I don't want to feel so separate from you. I would actually like deeper intimacy with you.
Yeah. That's such a tender, scary place for me.
Really uncomfortable place.
Yeah.
Especially if you're used to caregiving or you're used to being in this maternal role, which is to a certain extent about control. And so it's like you guys seem to be in a bit of a power dynamic, a bit of a power struggle, actually. And so that surrender is tender. That surrender is so tender. But if it's what you really want, you owe it to yourself to allow both of yourselves to be who you are without that needing to be one of you is right. And the one who is right wins and the one who loses retracts, because you know that thing about the beach ball, the more you press it underwater, the faster it rises and pops out of the water. And like when we try not to feel something or hold something back in a relationship, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The power under that submersion just builds and builds and builds until it starts to come out as resentment and does damage. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we can get into that place where we think we're being honest and telling it like it is, but we're actually coming out of a wound. We're actually coming out of a wounded place instead of being able to go in tenderly and say, I'm feeling pushed away, and I don't, and it feels scary to me and it feels sad, and I want to feel closer to you. How can we repair this? You know?
I've always felt like we were competing, or she was competing with me. I didn't recognize my own part in that, really.
Well, what you're saying was your dynamic with your own mom. So it's, unless that's really eradicated from the root, of course, can we have self-compassion around repeating that to a certain extent? Yeah. Can we have self-compassion about being so afraid of repeating it that we inadvertently repeat it and don't want to notice it because we're not repeating that under no circumstances? We've healed that generational trauma, damn it. And so we turn away from it and can't approach it with compassion for ourselves and others because we're like, no, that doesn't exist. Birds aren't real, yeah. So can we return to that tenderness? And then where's the tenderness for your own mother that lives in the way that you're carrying that? Is there forgiveness down the line that reverberates through time in the way that you're carrying that, in the way that you are willing to take responsibility for it?
I think in many ways I have forgiven my mother. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I haven't thought about what's left of that, at this point. My work has to do a lot with people who are homeless and addicted to drugs and things like that. It's kind of like, I think that's where I've learned to love my mother again. is by working with people who have been life has just been so hard on them.
So fractured. Yeah.
And I even saw that as a kid in her. Like I'm like, wow, she was absolutely gorgeous. She was a model and she was just this beautiful woman. And she was so destroyed. And I, especially when she drank alcohol, But I mean, that's where I've kind of learned more compassion for my mother and her family and, what they came through themselves. Somehow that doesn't change the fact that she really was so destructive. And
no, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. Forgiveness doesn't change what happened. It just changes the way that we meet and metabolize it and the way we carry it in our own lives. Like nothing.
I can't say that I completely forgive her only because I know myself. I still resent my first husband because I still have to see him all the time. My daughter and her husband live upstairs from him in San Francisco, and he's in my life. He's been in my life ever since we broke up when she was 3 years old. And I still resent him sometimes. And I'm like, how could I still be feeling resentment for this man after all these years when I thought, I think I forgive him. And then he's right there, acting crazy and doing shit that I get so mad about. And I still resent him. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm still carrying this around. So because of that, I'm like, well, I probably have some resentment for my mother, but it doesn't feel like it. Like I don't sense it when we're talking about it. I really feel like it's just been long enough. When she died, let's see, she died like 20 years ago or something, so.
That doesn't always matter.
No, I know. I realize that.
Time doesn't always, we have to participate with time in the dissolution of that hardness. Time doesn't always do it without our participation.
There's a lot of pain around her because I wanted her to love me so bad.
Oh, yeah.
I was a kid. I needed her love. And so there's still that kind of pain, which has often shown up in my relationships with women, friends, And my daughter was probably the first real love that I experienced since my father. Through my life, I didn't bring a tissue with me. Since my father left, that relationship with my daughter was the first real love where I'm like, wow. I don't know. I had no idea that a kid could come along and just, you were the sun and the moon, right? We're like the most important things to them. And they just she just popped my heart open in this huge way. So she was the reason I actually left my first husband because I realized how loveless our marriage was. She wasn't the reason, but she opened me up enough so that I realized that I wanted more. I didn't want to be in a loveless marriage.
Who does?
Yeah. So I think my relationship with Sarah is so tender because, she has been so important in my life.
Can you bring her this tenderness?
I think I can, actually. I didn't know how to show up with her before. This really helps open up a doorway that I can bring to her that's... she doesn't like emotions very much. So...
Well, it depends on how we bring our emotions to people. Are we bringing them because we want something? Because sometimes I think it can be very hard if we're sincerely in pain about something. Sometimes when we're dysregulated, we can bring that pain to somebody in a way that really is not to be tender with them, not to go deeper into intimacy, but to extract approval or validation from them. And it's not that the emotion is insincere, but the need is so primal and dysregulated that it can't be received the way we really mean it to be received.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That there is still a hook under it. There is still, please tell me you love me. Please tell me I'm worthy. Mm-hmm. Please tell me you value me.